Cities across Illinois are considering if they'll allow the sale of recreational marijuana. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. With me here today, Adrianna Pitrelli. She is State House Bureau Chief, Chicago Daily Law Bulletin. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
And Rebecca Anzel, State House reporter for Capitol News Illinois. Welcome back to you.
Thank you.
Okay. I opened the show by saying various cities are considering if they will, under the new state law that allows adult use of recreational marijuana by starting January 1st, if the cities will allow the sale thereof. Some cities have said yes already, including Naperville, including Urbana. Some cities have said no, Naperville, Morton, Murfreesboro. Springfield is considering. Rebecca, how's it going out there? And I guess cities have to determine if they want the revenue and if they want whatever they perceive to be the trouble.
Yeah, so they have until the end of the month to figure out whether they want to allow the sales, and if so, the tax revenue that comes with it. They get to set that tax percentage too. So
it's a maximum of 3% of a sales tax.
And I've heard from some local reporters that their municipalities are trying to figure out, their attorneys are trying to figure out what sort of other restrictions too that they're allowed to place on such sales, and apparently it's a little confusing for them. So it'll be interesting to see what they decide.
Yeah, there's a big new bill, and a lot out there. I heard Sheriff Jack Campbell on a radio show. He is Sangamon County Sheriff, who actually, before he got elected sheriff, he ran the medicinal marijuana program for the state. But he said he was opposed to adult use being legal for recreational purposes, but now that it's there, he thinks Sangamon County ought to get into it. The city of Springfield, their mayor and aldermen are talking as if they will be getting into it because it's a lot of money for cities. So we'll see where that one moves. Mm-hmm. We'll expect more action on that shortly, and some controversy, but less than there would have been in past years. And of course, Governor Pritzker ran saying he wanted adult use recreational marijuana. And of course, there is also a big part of that bill, which also is being worked out by state's attorneys and people across the state, is to expunge records of really, I think, hundreds of thousands of people in Illinois who were given convictions for possession of small amounts of marijuana, and I think it's under 30 grams. Mm-hmm. And basically saying, Governor Pritzker said, Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, that a lot of the problem with the drug war was that it seemed to affect communities of color more than other people. And a big part of this bill, and a reason that it got passed in Illinois with the governor's strong support, in addition to the money it will raise, was what they call the fairness factor. So I guess there's a lot of legalisms going on.
Right. A lot of people pegged it more of a decriminalization bill than necessarily a legalization bill. So even though it does both, it's kind of what they try to use to convince people that this is a good thing.
Yeah, and actually, as the cities across the state or municipalities are considering if they will do this, there is the money factor, and I know in Springfield they're talking about using some of the money from the 3% tax to pay police and fire pensions, which is a problem for local governments across the state to keep up with payments into those systems, many of which have fallen behind what they are supposed to be putting into those just to keep them solvent and ahead of the game. And in Springfield, there's been strong discussion that a part of that money will go to economic development, particularly on Springfield's east side, which has more economic development problems than some other parts of the city. So we will see where that goes. We don't have the legislators coming back into town until October 28th. So it's a little while away. There's going to be 2 weeks of 3 days of session each, and if they stay in session all three, sometimes if they got nothing to do, they don't do the full 6 days. We don't know exactly what's going to happen then, but we do know that there are federal in the light of mass shootings across the country, there are calls for more gun laws. Congress may be acting on this even before the legislature does, because there's been some movement even among Republicans talking about certain gun laws like red flag laws or some background checks. And the president, as we tape this, has indicated that he's willing to talk about it. But Governor Pritzker this week was among a dozen governors who signed a letter calling for sensible federal gun laws, universal background checks, red flag laws, which allow people to go to court with due process, but to take guns away from people that are considered dangerous by their family or people that know them in other ways, an outlawing of certain weapons that are considered assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, and some more health reporting requirements. So Illinois used to be very strong on gun control, but of course it was the last state in the country to go for concealed carry. But clearly there's going to be a sentiment in our legislature to do something, especially if the feds don't, I'm guessing.
Most definitely. I think especially as we get closer to the session, we will see bills filed. As far as I know, nothing's been filed yet, but of course there's been conversations, and there's been conversations for months, if not years, that something needs to be done. And as we're seeing more of these mass shootings, and we're seeing them at places where, it could happen to anybody, and you never know when it's going to happen. Everyone, I think, on both sides of the aisle know that something needs to be done. It's just everyone coming together and deciding what exactly that is. But what's interesting is, Pritzker and these other governors and a lot of Democrats, they're not saying we need to just ban guns. We're going to take everyone's guns away. They're not trying to shut down people's constitutional right here. They just want there to be more regulations, and they want people who should, in their eyes, not have these weapons to not have the weapons. So hopefully everyone can come together, and I think we'll see that happening soon.
Well, of course, there's always a regional divide, and it's more regional and partisan, whereas Southern Illinois, Central Illinois, Southern Illinois, where hunting is the thing, as it isn't in the suburbs as clearly as much. Certainly some people may leave the suburbs who enjoy that, but it's much more of a part of the fabric of society in Central and Southern Illinois. So that always makes it more difficult in Illinois to get stuff done, although there are fewer Southern Illinois Democrats than there used to be, and there's a lot in the Chicago area where the city has been known for gun control, so we might see some of those continuing battles between North and South there.
I was talking to a legal scholar of sorts earlier, and she was saying that one way lawmakers might go about doing this to sort of avoid any sort of litigation that will undoubtedly come from anything they pass would be to start very narrowly and expand from there. So maybe start by saying people under a certain age, like younger than 18, shouldn't have access to guns. And then maybe also restrict access to people who may have had a criminal record. And then if that doesn't work, kind of curb violence and kind of expand from there, but start very narrowly, see if that works, and then keep going. And but undoubtedly, whatever they pass will face some sort of litigation.
It is an ongoing discussion. And again, the feds may be moving on this because, again, President Trump has indicated some movement, but then we know that Wayne LaPierre of the NRA talked to him after the president initially said we need more background checks, and then after that discussion he said we've got a lot of background checks to a certain extent. And I guess a question at the federal level is private sales between people, because I know that an argument that I heard, for example, from Rodney Davis, a Republican member of Congress, is that, well, we don't want to restrict or cause a background check to be needed if you want to sell your nephew a gun. On the other hand, there have been some of these cases where it's a person-to-person sale where it may be somebody you don't know, and should background checks be involved in more? And clearly there is a movement among the more gun control-oriented people to go in that direction, and we'll see where it goes at the federal and state level. Hey, I always say we talk about federal and state stuff. Today there was some federal.
There you go.
Also laws that kind of affect where people are and what they hear. House Bill 3503 was signed by the governor. It requires insurance companies, I believe starting in January, to cover hearing aids for those 65 and up to $2,500 every 2 years. So that is a bill.
That is a bill. Yes, so basically, like you said, they want insurance companies to be able to help fund these hearing aids. People who have been in support of the measure have said, older people, they don't have a steady income, right? So they don't have as much money. Most of them don't have as much money to invest in something that they need. And it's just like, if you can't see, for instance, and you need glasses. I mean, not being able to hear is not just that we can't have a conversation, but if you think about them driving, for instance, and these police and firefighters, they can't hear those sirens. And so people need to hear, and so lawmakers who were in support of this are hoping that that will help them out.
Yeah, and it is surprising sometimes that some of those things can cost a bit and be it's not a luxury to a lot of people. Another bill that was signed will ban streaming video in cars. It was sponsored by Representatives Maurice West of Rockford and Senator Steve Stadelman, who is up from that territory too. And I think that's also January 1st. That seems to make sense. And I assume that it involves the driver not watching something, because distracted driving obviously is one of the bigger problems out there as far as accidents are concerned. So.
Yeah, definitely does not apply to passengers.
Right, because if you can't play a video for the kids, as I remember from a few years ago. We did get some news this last week that attendance at the DuQuoin State Fair was up 23% over last year. Now, there had been some talk earlier. There was a controversy about that state fair, which comes after the state fair in Springfield, because when Governor Pritzker's people basically learned or got wind of the fact that a band called Confederate Railroad had been booked to play it, they said, oh, they have a Confederate flag or the stars and bars in their logo, and we don't want them playing there, so they canceled the contract. The band ended up, I believe, not taking the money or donating it to somebody. But some people were very mad about that in the area of DuQuoin in southern Illinois, and talked about maybe not going to the fair or showing that their displeasure, but it seems like perhaps the weather and other things worked out okay.
Right, so it looked like people still showed up. They were excited. You know, Illinois is a long state, so I guess for people who live more in the southern area, they don't want to drive 2, 3, 4 hours up to Springfield, and the weather was beautiful this summer, so I feel like some people, you know, it wasn't, for some people, the Confederate Railroad thing wasn't that huge of a deal. I think it was it made a lot of headlines, but I don't know that the everyday person was that concerned about it, especially because their music wasn't like they had written songs that were bad or racist or anything. It was just their name.
And they've had the name for a number of years.
Right.
It did fuel the Chicago versus downstate controversy a little bit, with the very small handful of legislators who think that Chicago should be its own state and have a resolution to that effect, which is going nowhere, and which Jim Durkin, the leader of House Republicans, said was really just a re-election ploy for them, which of course they disagree with, but it's kind of an ongoing regional battle that this became part of, but seems to have moved in the past. So we'll see how next year's state fairs go with good weather. Maybe we'll get some more people at both. They also, in DuQuoin, just like in Springfield, they cut the ticket price just to get into the fair. There used to be a $2 ticket price in DuQuoin. They decided just to have a free gate this year. So that a little bit of incentive can certainly draw more people if you're bringing the whole family. One of the other things that is certainly in the news, federal and state level, is vaping. U.S. Senator Dick Durbin had called on the federal government to strongly regulate vaping, and then we've had a series of deaths. I think it's still under 10, but a lot of people sickened, and a lot of children, and some children dying across the country, including one person in Illinois from respiratory illness that has been linked to vaping. And President Trump said, or his administration said in the last few days, that they want to, at least for now, ban the sale of flavored vapes. And apparently this is a thing, and a lot of kids are using this because they have gumball flavor, things that sound more attractive. And at the state level, there may well be some action as well coming up in the fall.
Yeah, so Senator Durbin, this has been a plight of his for a very long time. The vaping industry sort of billed itself as a safer, healthier alternative to smoking, but as the anti-smoking advocates, I don't know what you would call them, but as they've pointed out, the vaping industry is never registered with the FDA as a cessation product, so they've never had to undergo that sort of testing. And so anyway, at the state's level, I think what you'll see during veto session is an effort by state lawmakers to sort of loop e-cigarettes, vapes, anything that sort of, is electronic smoking device, to be included in the smoke-free law that we have here. So just as, you can't smoke cigarettes in certain places and stuff, this is all going to get looped in with that.
Right, and Senator Durbin has a really big history with this. His father died of lung cancer. He has run on this for years. He was actually in the U.S. House, and he's been in the Senate for a long time, but I believe it was when he was still in the House that he pushed the idea that smoking shouldn't be allowed on airplanes, and particularly, people who work on the airlines were very upset that they were always having to smoke. They had a smoking section in the back, but as you know, from an airplane, it doesn't matter that much. And that really kind of led the way to what then became, it took years, I watched in the Illinois legislature, for the Clean Indoor Air Act to be finally passed after a former firefighter from Chicago, I think it was Bob Terzich, finally passed a bill years ago, but now it's just normal that you don't go in a building and smoke, but it used to be completely different. And so this, the whole vaping thing is coming under scrutiny, which I'm sure advocates of health are very happy about that, because it seems to have been a very fast-growing industry, and they do full-page ads in newspapers. So, well, it is what it is. So.
Right. And this week, the American Cancer Society had recognized Senator Durbin and Illinois Senate President John Cullerton for their work with Tobacco 21 and whatnot. So.
And yeah,
it will continue.
Yeah, and indeed. So we will see where that goes. Adrianna, you of course cover the courts, and there was some interesting news this last week. They tend to rotate, I think, every 3 years. The Chief Justice of the Illinois Supreme Court, 7 members on the court. The next one in line, who is supposed to take office October 26, taking over for Lord Carmire of Southern Illinois, is Ann Burke. Tell us a little about this. There's a little controversy involved.
There is a little controversy. So for those of you, excuse me, wow, words today.
Yeah.
For those people who don't know, her husband is Alderman Ed Burke up in Chicago, and he has faced quite a bit of controversy, is actually being indicted at the moment. And so people have said yesterday, when this came out earlier in the week, that she probably, shouldn't have this position. But the thing is, she and the alderman are two different people. They have 2 different careers, and she's really stayed out of the spotlight. She had a little bit of a controversy come up earlier in the year in regard to fundraising with Tony Peckwinkle. A board analyzed that situation. She was cleared of it.
Right, they had a fundraiser at their home,
right,
and people said she was involved.
Right.
But as a judge, you're not supposed to be advocating for candidates.
And she just said, we've been friends forever. We've been longtime friends, and she got cleared of that. She's been on the Supreme Court since 2006. She's done many things in the community. She's well respected. She
actually helped develop the Special Olympics and brought it to Soldier Field in Chicago. And I know Michael Sneed, who is a female columnist for the Chicago Sun-Times. You have to say that her name is Michael, but for years she always lauds Ann Burke for helping, bring that on.
Right.
And then the Kennedy family picked up on it and made it a national thing. And so she's done good things, but there is a lot of controversy in the family right now with her husband being accused of trying to finagle business out of people doing business with the city when for business for his law firm before they get certain permits from the city that he's been in charge of.
What you had mentioned was interesting, though, is when you said rotation. So they are rotated every 3 years. So when it looks like they're elected and that the Supreme Court chooses them, but she's known probably since 2006 that this was her year, and so it would have almost looked weirder for them to skip over her rotation than to put her in her slot. It would have just caused more controversy for those people who do know kind of how the courts work. It's an unofficial rule, but a rule nonetheless.
Now, I don't know this for sure, but I think there's usually a nice swearing-in ceremony for the new Chief Justice. It's often at the Supreme Court building here in Springfield, across from the Capitol. Renovated within recent years. It's a really beautiful building. We'll see if she shows up. I'm guessing there'll be a little more coverage of that if, the family is usually there. It just could be very interesting. So we will see where it goes. One of the, we should also mention on the legal situation, Lisa Madigan, the former Attorney General, announced that she is now a litigation partner with Kirkland & Ellis, which is a big law firm, and I believe her practice is going to be like Chicago and Washington. Even when she was Attorney General, she stayed in Chicago quite a bit. She lives there. She's still got smaller children. I guess they're growing up now. There must be somewhere in school. But This is an interesting thing. People wondered what she might do after being Attorney General for all those years, which generally people in public service like that don't make as much money as people in private practice with a giant firm. We don't know what she's making, but I'm assuming this is a good move for her and her family.
Most definitely. I mean, she's relatively young. You know, she's not ready to retire. She took some time off, spent time with her family, kind of figured out what she wanted to do. You know, when she first stepped down from her position, she said she had no immediate plans, and that's what she wanted to do, is just spend time with her family. You know, after being in the public eye for so long, and you know, you just want some time alone, and so it makes sense, I think.
It does. I'll bet you people may want to use her. I mean, it's just when you are a political name, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying if you're a known person, sometimes people say, hey, how about if I get you to be my lawyer or your firm to be my lawyer? So it's not necessarily, if you can look at that either way, but I just say that might happen. So it's probably a feather in the firm's cap, and she's, you know, I think a knowledgeable attorney, so that's a good. She's certainly not a figurehead type person. One of the ongoing battles that we are going to see played out in Illinois over the next year, until the election of November 2020, is if the Constitution should be amended, as the legislature has called, to put on the ballot of 2020 for a fair tax. That's what the governor calls it, a progressive income tax instead of the flat tax, which is now called for in our Constitution. There are business groups and others, one led by Greg Bays, who is the former head of the Illinois Municipal League, who say that, you know, it's just a blank check to raise taxes, whereas Governor Pritzker and many people who advocated for this say it's much more fair for people with more money to pay a higher tax rate, income tax, as well as others. And so there will be this big fight. But one interesting twist in this last week is Personal PAC, which is a abortion rights group, women's health group, but it's run by Terry Cosgrove, who actually was head of the student government when I was on the Daily Illini at the University of Illinois in the 70s. But he has for years run this group. They are very aggressive campaigners. They came out, they endorsed what they called a fair tax this week and came on board with Mr. Cosgrove saying women's health needs funding like everything else. The governor says a better way to fund the state is with a progressive income tax. It should raise, I think, more than $3 billion a year in addition to what's being raised now. And of course they claim, the others don't believe it, but they claim that under the rates they've passed, and if those rates stay, that the top 3% of earners will pay more and 97% of people will pay the same or less in taxes under their scheme. So it's just kind of interesting to mix abortion rights, an abortion rights group, and this tax question, which also may have kind of an upstate downstate conservative liberal divide. So
yeah, he wrote an op-ed, Terry Cosgrove, and he had said that there's a lot of inequalities amongst which women get which health care, and you know who pays what in the current tax scheme, and so he kind of came out in support of the graduated income tax because of the equities that would be created under it. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. Another development in the last week, and this is a little interesting to me, Rivian Automotive is the company that bought the plant that used to be run by Mitsubishi, automotive car plant in Normal. I know this because I covered when the Japanese company came to Normal like 35 years ago. They went out of business a few years ago. Rivian Automotive purchased it. They're building an electric pickup truck that they hope to go big with nationwide. They've already gotten an investment of $500 million from Ford and $700 million from Amazon, and something called Cox Automotive said this week made a $350 million investment. So it looks like this is going somewhere. This is the plant, I must remind. The former Governor Ronner kept saying nobody would even take that plant if we gave it to them, but he had actually should have known better because he was there when Rivian Automotive, when he was at an announcement saying they had purchased the plant, and the state is offering $49 million in incentives. So it's an ongoing story. We will see if they ever do gin up to great production, but that plant may again hum and make a lot of vehicles that will be used, and they have a pretty interesting looking little truck. It's an interesting startup, so we'll see where it goes, electric vehicles. one very odd thing. There is
We're
very
already
odd
laughing.
thing. There is something called Big Seven Travel that put out some kind of ranking of states and found Illinois to be #1 of the sexiest states in America. And they said it was because the top spots of the sexiest, Illinois takes first place and easily topped our poll for 2019. Who could disagree with this? It's no wonder so many celebrities, sports people, and singers that come from here are outrageously attractive. You might recognize, and it's spelled with an S, so this must be British, Michelle Obama and Dwayne Wade. So Illinois, that's a very interesting thing. Was anybody surprised, or is that just me?
I would pick like California, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, we
You
have.
remember the Beach Boys. Well, anyway.
Yes. Okay. Exactly. I don't know. Some state on the coast. I mean, once again, take this with a grain of salt, but I think it's hilarious. Illinois, of all places, we have. I don't even know what the population of this state is. A lot.
It's about 13 million.
And I want to know like what people they looked up. Did they Google most I'm very confused.
Yes.
I don't know.
Keep your attitude up. Perhaps we're better than some think. Anyway,
Maybe.
we're going to have to end it there. Adrianna Pitrelli, Rebecca Anzel, thank you for your thoughts. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week on Capitol View.